Well, let's begin with the big story and what we know so far. It's a fast developing story where we are seeing the first signs perhaps of a breakthrough in talks between Russia and Ukraine. Remember, there have been several rounds of talks, but this one is important because it ended with fairly concrete and acceptable proposals coming in from Ukraine that Russia seems to have taken to positively. One of them is that Ukraine will not really have any military association, for example, with NATO. Now, let me just take you through quickly how markets have reacted to this. So just for the latest, the Dow Jones up about 264 points now. The Nasdaq also up in the green, 1.5% up actually. And the S&P 500 also close to a percentage up. Meanwhile, oil, as expected, has taken a walloping. So has gold. All of those safe haven commodities have taken a hit after this news has come out. So on the oil front, we've seen Brent go down by almost 5 to 6% just in the day's trade, and it's quite volatile because it's not quite clear what's going to happen. So in the latest, I'm seeing Brent 2.5% down in the red at $110 per barrel. It's gone down as much as $106 per barrel. It's not clear yet whether this means truce, but there is hope that it could. That's why we've seen gold also take a tumble, because remember, these are all safe haven commodities. Gold down about 1.5%. So we're going to get into how much can you believe Russia if this truce does take place. Does it mean Putin comes out stronger or weaker? What about Zelensky? What about Biden? We're going to talk about that and get to that chat in just a bit. But first, let me get you this ground report from Lviv, where Times Network's Deepak Bopanna is and has just filed this report. Take a look.
Yes, even as we see the war, of course, raging in Ukraine and between Ukraine and Russia for over 30 days now, there seems to be some sort of meaningful negotiation that has been held in Turkey's Istanbul, where the Russian negotiators have said that they are willing to reduce the military buildup around Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, and Chernihiv as well. Now, this, of course, they say is a move that's being done to somewhere, build a mutual trust, and also to somewhere find a solution to end this war and for paving way for future negotiations between, Ukraine and Russia as well. Now, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, of course, up until now has been saying all that he's been seeing on the ground and from his intelligence agencies is an increased buildup of the Russian military. We'll really have to see whether Russia really lives up to, the statements or the indications that have been given at this particular negotiation meet, and how, these indications will really come along to put an end to this particular war that rages on and leaves behind a massive, massive humanitarian crisis.
The world may soon have reason to cheer in signs that Russia and Ukraine are inching closest to a truce than they have been all of this time. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has now been going on for over a month. In the latest round of talks, which took place in Istanbul for over 3 hours, there seems to be some breakthrough. So for one, what we're gathering from news agencies and reports is that Ukraine has agreed in its proposal to Russia to adopt a neutral stance in return for security guarantees. Now, what do you mean by a neutral stance? A neutral stance would mean that Ukraine won't join any military alliance like NATO. And remember, that was the bone of contention that started all of this off. What are the security guarantees? So 4 nations could possibly be the guarantors. These are Poland, Israel, Turkey, and Canada. These could be the security guarantors for Ukraine. That means Ukraine has a buffer in case Russia becomes aggressive again. Ukraine has reportedly also proposed a 15-year-old consultation process on Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014. Now, in response, the Russian Deputy Defense Minister, Mr. Fomin, has come out with a statement. This was reported by Russian news agencies, in which he is saying that Russia will be drastically reducing military action in Kyiv and Chernihiv. Now, the context to this also is that Russia has been surrounding the capital of Kyiv for quite a few weeks now, but has not made too much head through. Whether it's because there was too much resistance from Ukraine or Russia held back, well, that depends on which side you believe. But the fact is that it could be a hugely positive development. Let me go across now to Maroof Raza and Ambassador Vishnu Prakash for more on this developing story. Ambassador Prakash, let me come to you with that basic question. Is this the start of a truce, or are we being optimistic at this point?
Well, greetings. It's a good development. Nothing is certain. In such situations, there is always back and forth. There are many false starts or few false starts, but there were straws in the wind which indicated that both sides were exhausted, both sides were chastened, and this is a stage when sides are ready to talk. So the offer of neutrality, the suspension of attacks on Kyiv and Chernihiv, etc., are good signs. And already it seems that Russia has scaled back its ambition when it says that they are going to concentrate on liberating Donbass. But here is the issue. The issue is the reality is that the security guarantees are hardly worth the paper they are written on. Hypothetically, if Russia were to wage an aggression 15 years or 5 years from now, will Israel, Poland, etc., attack Russia, counterattack Russia? Already guarantees were given to Russia when after the breakup of Soviet Union that NATO will not expand eastwards. Guarantees were given to Ukraine. What happened? So there is complete lack of trust. And these provocative statements by President Biden calling Putin a killer, butcher, war criminal is not helping. But there, somewhere along the line, they have to sit down and start negotiating. It is a good step forward, but I will not pop the champagne as of yet.
Getting so far, Ambassador Prakash, and obviously these are now reports as this is a very quickly developing story. If Ukraine agrees to not join any military group like NATO, does Russia essentially get what they wanted, which started off this entire conflict?
Let us look at what has happened from the Russian point of view. They have degraded the military infrastructure of Ukraine. They have managed to, or they are in the process of carving out a buffer in eastern Ukraine. And they have made it very clear that they are going to use force if Ukraine was to join NATO. So these bits are very much in place, but there are two difficulties here. One, will President Putin be able to sell this as an achievement to the Russian public, or it will be difficult for him? I cannot guess one way or the other or assess. It could work both ways. Two, President Putin believes that Mr. Zelensky is the source of all problems. Now, if Mr. Zelensky continues, will that be acceptable to Mr. Putin? It's a question. And third, what does the West want? Because the decision, the ball lies also in the court of Washington. Will they be willing to give a face saver to Putin, or will they press ahead? So there are questions. There are mixed signals. It is positive. At the same time, it is worrisome when Medvedev says that Russia can use weapons of mass destruction as a last resort. So as is common in this situation, there are straws in the wind, but it is on balance, it is a positive development. We need to keep our fingers crossed.
Maroof Raza connected now. Maroof, great to speak with you on this developing story and very important story. Are we truly seeing the first solid signs of truce in this and nearing to an end of the conflict?
Yeah, let's hope so, because we must understand the very reasons how the conflict came into being in the first place. You see, Mr. Putin and his closest advisors have believed, and they have reasons to believe, that from 2008 onwards, the international community led by US and some European powers were trying to rub Russia's nose onto the ground and making them feel small after the collapse of the Cold War, in which, as we all know, Russia and the West were loggerheads about the possibility of a larger political conflict. So therefore, you must go back to addressing the issues that led to the start of the tensions first. Secondly, Mr. Zelensky now says that I don't think we have a chance of getting into NATO. That was not really ever a hope that we could nurture, at least in the last month or so. I wish he had said it earlier. Had he said it earlier, we wouldn't have had this destruction and bloodshed. Thirdly, the Americans are desperate to show Russia in poor light. So they will exploit the outcome of whatever peace arrangement as it comes out as something that America, with its support of its allies through Ukraine, has belittled Russia and made it look a power which is not exactly a superpower, but a military power which can do some damage in Europe. Fourth, what is Russia going to settle for? I have said all along, Russia's options were threefold. A very ambitious project would have been to take over all of Ukraine. A mid-level project would have been to take control of eastern Ukraine with the Dnieper River dividing the country into two parts, eastern bloc in Russia's control. But what has come out is Russia is not just military power to take on the bloc of Europe. Of Ukraine. So what Russia is going to get is the areas that it has captured militarily, and that will work as a narrow buffer between possibly any military footprint that might come into Ukraine and Russia's borders. Though I feel that this conflict has shaken up Europe, it has shaken up NATO, it has shown that NATO is a toothless tiger, especially without the United States.
But is that truly the case? I mean, you're talking about the game of perception, Maroof, and that's absolutely what's going to happen. If this truce does work out, both sides will say that we got what we wanted. But isn't the fact that Europe did come closer together and that Russia's economy was wrecked? They've become one of the most sanctioned nations in the world. Hasn't that maybe contributed in some way to the toned down words that we're hearing today from the Russian side?
There are many reasons. Both sides have taken a more realistic stance. As far as Russia is concerned, I think it's realized that it got its war plans and war aims completely wrong. That happens when you're in a state of delusion about your worth and your power. The second thing is that Europe has also had a wake-up call and is going to recalibrate both its military and energy policies, not to be held hostage by Russia in future in a situation. But having said that, Russia is far from crippled militarily, economically, and even geopolitically. This has given Russia an opportunity to get closer to China. And let's face it, China has deep enough pockets to address Russia's requirements. Russia is still one of the world's largest exporters of oil and various other minerals and materials. It was hoping to expand its control over global markets of grain through Ukraine, but that has failed. So it's a mixed bag. I think we'll have to wait and watch how Putin survives the outcome and the perception of this within the Russian public. But it has also shown to China that any ambitious activity based on Russia's model in Ukraine towards Taiwan would not have the kind of results that China was hoping to have. So there's going to be a lot of recalibration, rethinking, and Europe is going to back again be divided into an East Bloc and West Bloc, though not as harshly as in the days of the Cold War.
So just to give our viewers a sense of what's happening around the world, and markets are usually a very accurate and quick barometer of sentiment and reaction to news. So look at the European markets right now. All up in the green, the DAX up about 3.5%, so is the CAC. The FTSE up over 3%, up over 783 points. Meanwhile, commodities are crashing. Remember, crude prices had run up in fears of an extension of the conflict and a reduction in how much crude would be available. Russia is a huge supplier of crude. So Brent right now down to 106. We've not seen those levels in quite some time, down another 6%. It'll be interesting to see how US opens. So far, US futures also looking very buoyant. Dow futures up nearly 300 points, over 1%. So those are markets cheering on what will happen. My question to you, Ambassador Prakash, the question I was coming to you with, if all goes well, because now the Russians are saying whatever has been decided and whatever progress has been made so far in this Istanbul talk will lay the ground for a possible meeting between Putin and Zelensky and the signing of a pact. What happens to all of the steps that the West have taken, the sanctions against Russia? Do those all then roll back?
The sanctions will not be rolled back in a hurry. I guess some sanctions may be rolled back. I would think that the Russian side will insist that all the sanctions should be rolled back. That will be the maximalist position. But some will be rolled back, some will not be. The long and short is that Russia is diminished. Russia has taken a beating. They have, and they don't have too many choices. The way things have panned out for them is that today they find themselves literally isolated. And I am not very sure whether China is going to be by their side if Russia becomes a liability. So Russia needs an honorable exit. Russia needs to somehow declare victory, sell it to its people, and get out of this situation. But this solution is not going to be there because even if a buffer is created, the Ukrainian ambitions of cutting loose of Russia is very much there. I think it would mean is a pause, not a full stop. This conflict has been infructuous, damaging, and for Ukraine, for Russia. But as far as the US is concerned, the US has emerged as a preeminent player. That is what it looks like at the moment.
Would you agree with that, Maroof? The US emerges stronger out of all of this? I mean, at the end of the day, it's Erdogan who had to step in and ensure that both sides actually get to the negotiating table. Out of the four guarantor countries that have been mentioned in Ukraine's proposal, Turkey is one of them, of course, Canada, Israel as well. Do you think America comes out of this stronger? Because this was also a fight for, which is the dominating bloc in geopolitics.
Well, America needed a kind of situation that would allow them to climb back from the very low esteem that they had adopted or they had received after their humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan. I mean, they needed a story to sell to their people that America is back again, America is not finished. And therefore, all the chest thumping and table thumping that Mr. Biden and his other colleagues did was effective to that. It made them achieve if Russia now agrees to a full stop. But we must understand that America could not have been the peace broker or the negotiator because it's party to the conflict. Why? Because America, at the very first instance, dismissed the Budapest arrangements of 2008, and that started, a certain level of anger in Russia to get back at those who had destroyed whatever was available to them at the end of the Cold War, which was a promise and an arrangement that the new lines would not be drawn across Europe the way they were in the Cold War days. So there is that problem. The second thing is the kind of military support that America and its friends have provided Ukraine has now the rivalry is out in the open. It's America versus Russia. China, they will handle at a later stage. That's the general narrative in Washington. The third thing is that as far as Russia is concerned, as Ambassador Vishnu Prakash has brought out, Russia has come out of it looking bad, but Russia is not finished. And Russia sanctions per se, I don't think had taken root to the extent that we would have seen the Russians queuing up for bread as they did in the Great Depression and after that all over the world. So Russia, yes, has been hurt, but see the level of damage Russia has brought to bear in Ukraine. I mean, over a basic, exceptional argument both sides were pursuing, NATO or non-NATO. I think what really the winner out of this all, you might find that I'm saying a strange thing, But the winner out of this all is Ukraine. It has stood up to the Russians. It has now got everybody in the world to look at Ukraine sympathetically, and it has crafted a new narrative for Europe that if one country like Ukraine can stand up to the might of Russia, I mean, why was the rest of Europe sitting and quivering on their chairs in their offices?
Absolutely, absolutely. They all just sent, their moral wishes to Ukraine. And in terms of personalities, because at the end of the day, this was also about personalities. I'm going to ask Ambassador Prakash to weigh in on this. You had Putin, who was being looked at either as a bully or someone defending his turf, depending on which side you saw. Zelensky came out as a hero who stood his ground and didn't leave. Biden, on the other hand, how do you think these three people emerge from this conflict?
If this is going to be a victory for Ukraine, I do not want to be Ukraine. What has been left of Ukraine, it has been devastated. I don't think that is a price worth paying. Clearly, there was an overreach on the part of Mr. Zelensky, and he is disillusioned. So no, I don't think that Ukraine has won. I would again believe or feel that, all on balance, the US has played its cards well. They have diminished Russia. There is reinforcement of the transatlantic alliance. There is the American preeminence that has emerged. And there is now daylight between Russia and Europe. So all the objectives of the US have been achieved. I think that Ukraine is the biggest loser as far as I'm concerned, because they will take decades to recoup the losses, human and material, that they have suffered.
Thousands of people have lost their lives, generations upended, and really nothing is worth that price. Maroof, at the end of the day, Ukraine and NATO, that dream then remains unfulfilled, where this conflict started with. So in a sense, Russia did get its way. Putin did get its way.
See, essentially, I believe it's been a win-win for a lot of people, despite the very high price that has been paid. It was said of Britain at the end of World War II that it lost every battle, but it still won the war. So, I mean, the US, of course, has achieved many of its objectives, but I don't say the US can actually, in all sincerity, clap itself on its back to say that it's done very well. It, yes, was able to bury the ghost of Afghanistan, but the US has certainly shown and has been shown that without the US, NATO or Europe is not going to be able to hold their ground. And the US, of course, has become the preeminent power in Europe again. Russia militarily has had many reverses, but what Russia has been able to achieve, as Ambassador Vishnu Prakash brought out, that drawing the line about NATO not coming in, Ukraine heavily destructed, but I think it will be built back soon because there is money to be made in post-war contracts. Remember, Germany was destroyed after World War II, not for the fault of all the Germans, of course, Hitler and the Nazis being separate, but look at how well it has come out, and there will be, I mean, with death and destruction, there is always hope and courage that follows after that.
Yeah.
So I see Ukraine prospering at give it another 5 years, it'll come out of it. I'm not dismissing the death and the destruction.
Absolutely.
The very severe.
Look at the families been destroyed. Yep, look at the families that have been destroyed, the lives that have been lost, and one wonders that could these conversations have not taken place 4 or 5 weeks ago. It really seems so senseless in hindsight. Thank you so much, Maroof Raza and Ambassador Prakash. This is a developing story. We're keeping an eye on it, but definitely the first glimmer of hope for an end in conflict in sight. Joined now by HP Ranina.